Rebecca Flaherty, and today I'm going to show you how to make a cute candy corn pattern using the Pattern Maker canvas. I'm going to start drawing here in my Draw Here First layer. This canvas, you can buy this canvas set up with all of these layers and labels and seamless textures in it over in my Etsy shop, and I'll put a link in the description, and this video will show you how to use it. So we're going to start in our Draw Here First layer, and I'm going to grab this brush here, which you can download from my Freebie Library, this candy corn stamp brush. And I'm just going to grab any old colour, black will do, and let's see how big this comes out. Maybe we'll go a bit bigger for this. So let's try this at 15%. So I think 15% is probably a good size to use for this pattern. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stamp a few of these motifs around the canvas on my Draw Here First layer, just to get them evenly placed out. And remembering that if I put something on this edge of this one, it's also going to be repeated down there, so I don't need to stamp too close to that edge. So we'll just put a few around like that, just to see how that's looking. Then we're going to merge this down with our sketch diamond, and then we'll duplicate this layer, tap up here to transform, make sure we've got magnetics and snapping turned on, and then we're going to bring it down here and over to the right. Duplicate that bottom layer again, bring it up and over to the left. Duplicate this one and bring it up and over to the right. If you want a slower and more in-depth starter version of how this diamond method works, I've got another YouTube video which goes into a bit more teaching depth on that, and I'll put a link to that in the description and also at the end of this video. So now we've got this one spread all around there, we can see how the motifs are going to look when they're repeated, and I think we're kind of missing something about here. So I'm going to kind of offset and bring the edges into the middle. So on this top layer, I'm going to duplicate it and drag it over there and bring that one over there, pinch them together, and then this bottom one, I'm going to duplicate that, drag that over to the left and bring this one over to the right. And then that way I can see this gap more in the middle and see where everything is kind of playing into that one. I'm going to add a layer above this one so I can transform it freely. So let's just stamp a candy corn down there. And to be honest, that's probably in a fairly okay position. Maybe I might make it, I feel like these two just need to be a bit more spread out. So this one here, let's bring the opacity down on this layer so we can see which one we're working with. So that's on the top layer, so we can put that back when we move them around. But this one, let's move that one down a bit, put this on freehand, turn snapping and magnetics off. That probably just needs to move down a bit, and then when we go back to the middle, I'm going a diamond rather than an X. I'm going to move this one up a bit. So let's merge that one down. I'm going to delete this top one and put this one back where it was supposed to be. Snapping and magnetics on, and then drag this one over there. And I can see here I've gone slightly wrong. That's the good thing about having this precise diamond layer on there. You can really easily see if you've gone wrong. So I'm going to undo that, although I like to think that I would have noticed those bits anyway. Let's undo that, get back to there and drag this a bit more carefully this time. There we go. So mistakes happen. It's always a case of just checking and verifying everything as you go. So now we can merge these two together, and I'm going to do the offset and bring this into all the corners. So probably the hardest thing with this is getting all these nicely evenly spaced out, trying to look like they're random, but obviously they're not random because we're purposefully placing them in place. So it was this one here that I think we just wanted to move up a little bit, which is no problem, even though it's attached to, get my select tool, even though it's attached to the diamond, it's okay to move this up. Okay, it's not that one there, maybe it's that one. So actually, what I think I'll do probably because I want to move it up past that line there, I will actually let's erase it from up here. We'll just completely rub that one out. And then this one down here, we can just draw another one in. So I'm going to add a layer, stamp one in there, and let's just move this one probably about there. We can merge that down with this one. And then let's turn snapping back on and see how this is looking. We can delete this top sketch diamond, duplicate this one. See there, we wouldn't have been able to drag that if we'd been working with that one, so it was a good idea to use that one. We can merge those together. And then the next thing that I would do is I'm going to want to look at this pattern overall in a smaller scale so we can see how it's looking. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers, I'm going to tap copy all, and then I'm going to go right up to my top layer, swipe down again and tap paste. Then I'm going to snap this up to the orange lines halfway, duplicate and drag it across to the right, pinch those together, duplicate and drag those down. And now we can see this on a much smaller scale. And right away, this area here is jumping out to me. It's kind of there, there, there. That's jumping out to me as an empty space. So what I think I will do is move this one down slightly and probably move this one up a little bit. So let's try and find those. So that would be this one here and that one, which I think is probably that one on our sketch layer. So let's start with this one. Turn snapping off. So we were going to drag that one down slightly, and then need to know where that one's going to go. So I'll just duplicate this one with snapping on and move that over there. So now I know that this one further down is the new position. So then that will mean I've got a visual for moving this one. Just turn snapping off. And I think that should be a lot nicer spaced out. So now I can delete these 2 layers above and go back to transforming this one around with snapping back on again. Drag these all the way around. And although I'm going through this pretty fast, don't forget I've been doing this for a long time. When you're new to learning something, it is okay for this to take a while, and it's okay to pause this and, you know, work through. So don't compare how the speed you're going to the speed somebody is going when they've been doing something for a long time. Be kind to yourself. It took me a long time to just be able to space these out and find it quick to do. And yeah, I was hard with myself in the beginning as well. Just remember to be kind with ourselves, whatever we're doing. So I think that is probably now nicely spaced out. We could do one more check. Let's swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, we'll go up to here and we'll paste it in. We'll snap it up to halfway, duplicate and drag it across. Duplicate this and drag it down. And then what we could do, I always like to, I'm going to turn the bottom layer on underneath, I always like to see little before and afters that show the difference between what was and what I just did and the next step. So if we show and hide this one now, you can see the difference between the before and after, and I think this one is looking a lot more nicely spaced out. So let's get rid of those. I think the other thing that I might want to do is just put some stars in with this. So on this layer, let's put the position of where those can go, and I think not a candy corn this time. I'm going to go up to the set that comes with my pattern maker canvas, and we'll use this mini dot here, not that many, and we'll just put a few of these little dots all the way around, just plonk them in randomly to start with, and then we can see how they line up with what's around them as we offset these layers. And things we want to look out for here is that, you know, if I'd done on this layer, for example, if I'd done a dot, where's one that's close to the edge? If I'd done one up here, and let me move this one, and done there, before having seen these ones on the outside. So things to look out for are having bits like this that are too close together. So I'm just gonna undo that, but I think that's looking pretty good though. Those dots are all pretty evenly spaced. So I think we're ready to go on to the next step, which is illustrating our final motifs. Now we've got all these on the sketch layer. So let's turn our pattern layer on. You can see when I'm working on the pattern layer, you'll see this marker here. And on this first layer, I'm just gonna, well, let's turn this layer down a bit so that we know which ones we have to draw. So we'll reduce the opacity on the top layer that's got the bits around the outside, and then these motifs here are the only ones that we need to illustrate. So on this layer here, which I will label this one up Candy Base, and I'm just going to use any old colours for the moment. We'll probably just go for white. And using the tracing crayon on this layer, and I've got my size set to 10%, I'm just going to trace over these shapes here. I might do that a bit bigger so we've got rougher edges on this. And the reason that I like to redraw my motifs rather than just using these stamps, for example, why aren't I just using that and then using the fill? I like to have each one look slightly different, so I'm not sticking too closely to the lines, as you can see. I like to have each one look slightly different and unique. So although we're using the same stamp, you know, as a motif and repeating it, each one of these is going to look slightly different and unique. And we also get this nice crispy, crunchy edge of the brush rather than the sort of slightly fuzzy edge of the stamp, depending on what scale we've used it at. So that's that layer done now. I can fill all these in. Oh, I missed that one. And I'm going to make the background colour a bit darker so that we can now go around and trace around all these little gaps there. I know you can bring the threshold up, but I find it never quite gets to the edge. And what I normally do is I will fill these in Photoshop, so I would just leave it at this stage and then do my clipping masks over the top, and then when I come to edit this in Photoshop, I've got a Photoshop action set up to fill this bit with just one click. But as we've only got a few of these motifs, I'm just going to trace over them today in Procreate. If you want to take a look at that video, I will put a link to it in the description. So let's just finish these off. So that's our candy corns done now. Let's change this background colour to maybe a nice dark blue, or we could go for a Halloweeny purple actually, something like this. And now we've done that, we can't see our lines so well, so what I'm going to do, so that we can easily see the colours, what I'm going to do is tap on this one and I'm going to invert the colour, and that will change it from black to white. Let's now do the stars, and we'll do those underneath, I think. So let's make this one called Stars, and I'm just going to use a different colour to do this. I do eventually want them in white, but we'll just use a different colour so I can see them over this white. So I'm just going to literally just stamp over what I had before. And then we'll change the colour on those in a second. So let's alpha lock this layer and let's fill it with white. Tap fill there. Right, so that we can see the stripes on the candy corn for where to trace over. And what I'm going to do is drag my sketch layer above, and I'm going to invert this layer again now, so then we can see it over there. And then I'm going to go onto my candy base, and I'm going to add a layer above, clip it to the layer below, and we will grab a orange colour for this layer. And I think I'll use the Fun Sketcher for this one actually, because I want this to be nice and sketchy and loose. So what I'm going to do is just, let's make the brush a bit bigger, and we'll just use that to loosely scribble this middle orange section in. And we don't have to stick too much to the lines. As I say, we want each one of these to be slightly unique. And then we'll add another layer, and I'm going to grab a kind of creamy white colour for this one, and we'll just scribble that over the top part there. This one probably doesn't show up as being much different for the white, but I think it was just going to give it a bit of warmth. And then I'll add another layer, clip this one, and this final layer is going to be yellow. Let's grab this one, and we'll just draw a layer yellow over that bottom part. Nice and scruffy and loose, and you can see the lovely texture of this Fun Sketcher brush, how you get all those different textures coming in. Oh, and we've also got the texture over the top, so that's without the overlay textures, and then that's what you get with the overlay textures. So those are now done. Did we change the colour of our stars? We did, but the sketch is on top, so I think actually we can turn the sketch off now. And let's add a bit of sparkle to our stars. So I'm going to swipe to duplicate this stars layer, and I'm going to turn off alpha lock on the bottom layer, and I'm going to come up to adjustments. I'm going to go to Gaussian blur, and I'm going to bring up Gaussian blur to maybe 8%, and as you can see, that's, if I turn this bottom one off, you can see that's given that a really nice soft sparkly glow. I'm going to duplicate that layer just to make it a bit brighter. Maybe turn the opacity down on that one a bit. So I'm going to put this top one at 71%, but you can experiment with those to see which kind of effect you like. And then I think the only last thing I might want to do is to add a bit of shading to these candy corns. So I'm going to go up to this top layer with the yellow here. I'm going to add a layer above, tap on clipping mask, and I'm going to go to my disc, and I'm going to double tap here to get a 50% grey. And let's use this gradient texture small. And on this layer here, we're going to make the colour blend mode colour burn. We'll set the opacity to 40%, and then drawing with this nice grey colour, make the brush a bit bigger. Maybe bring the opacity up a bit actually. Let's try it at 50%. Make the brush a bit bigger. You can see we get this nice, slightly shaded effect. I'm going to imagine the light coming from this top left corner, and just shade the bottom right of all the shapes down here. And then we want to add a little bit of highlight to the tops. So I'm going to add another layer above. I'm going to make this layer blend mode color dodge. I'm going to set the opacity, we'll try 40% and see how that goes. We'll also put a clipping mask on, and using this same 50% grey, we're just going to add a touch of highlight to the top of those. and I might bring the opacity up on that one a bit as well, to 50. So if you look at these, if I turn these off, you can see that's flat and that's with that little bit of shading on there. And then one last thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this speckled brush here, or actually let's give the sandstorm brush a try. And then on each of these layers, the colour burn and the colour dodge, with again the 50% grey, and this brush is 22%, I'm just going to give a little scribble over each one of these, just to add a little bit more, let's zoom out on this one, just a little bit more grunge and texture to those. I think on this one I might have forgotten to put the cream colour on there, so let's put that on. And then we can go back to this colour burn layer with our grey and the sandstorm brush and carry on just adding that little bit of scribble over there, maybe make this a bit bigger, and then go onto our colour dodge layer, and that's going to add a little bit of that grungy scribble in the lighter colour over the top. And the great thing about using colour dodge and colour burn to do the shading rather than just grabbing a darker orange colour or a darker yellow colour is that by putting it on top, we're able to apply it to both the yellow and the orange at the same time, and it blends perfectly with those. But also we can change the colours of these out as well and not have to redo the shading. So if I wanted to make these candy corns, for example, pink and purple, and you can see we've still got that shading, we wouldn't need to redo it. So that is why I love to use colour dodge and colour burn as clipping marks over the top for shading. So now all our motifs are all illustrated, and we only had to do these few ones here. We can now build out this pattern tile. So the first thing I'm going to do is to hide that pattern marker layer down there. We've already hidden our sketch layer. We didn't need to use the extra layer this time. So I can just swipe to duplicate this pattern layer, tap and flatten it, and then I'm going to drag this out here above my layers. Normally I would do this in Photoshop, but it's okay to build it out in Procreate as well. If I was doing it in Photoshop, I'd be able to make this a smart object and then duplicate it around the canvas so that any changes I made to the main one would also update in the others. But as we're doing this in Procreate, I'm gonna keep this intact, so I've always got that to go back to, and we'll just flatten a copy of it. So we need to un-alpha lock that and add just a little marker to the corners so that we can still be grabbing pixels all the way to the edges of all four sides of the canvas. So we can swipe to duplicate that one, snap this one down, and it's really important to make sure that you've got these orange lines there. I'm gonna hide my layers group. That will help this snap a lot easier, because then it will just be snapping to the canvas rather than bits that are on the edges down here as well. So let's duplicate this layer again, and we can bring it up here. This one's snapping a lot easier now I've turned off those underneath layers. And then bring this one down here. Pinch those together. We can erase those bits in the middle, and we can do the pink ones as well. And now, if we pinch those together, that is now our seamless pattern tile, and you could export that as a JPEG or PNG and upload to somewhere like Redbubble or Spoonflower. First of all, let's look at it with and without the texture layers. So this is how it would look without the texture over the top. And that's the effect you get with these seamless texture overlays. So let's have a look at a preview of that in Repeat now. We'll swipe down with 3 fingers. We'll copy all, go up to the top, swipe down again, and we'll paste. Drag this up to halfway. And then we can duplicate this around the canvas. And then if we zoom in there to the middle, you can see how all these textures are nice and seamless. That's where they meet up. You can see there's no lines there. And that's how our pattern is going to look in Repeat on a large scale.